Good morning. I know this is Hartford and people love to network. It continues. So hard to stop.
Hi.
My name's JC McCauley.
I'm Naisha McCauley, and you're watching AccessTV.org.
Thank you all so much for being here. It is so nice to see so many faces of leadership in Hartford that is so cross-sector, something that I just feel makes our city so incredibly unique and so incredibly lucky. It's been a long road for Achieve Hartford and for those who have been with us from the beginning. We just had our 9th birthday, and I look around the room and I'm thinking, that's a long time to be working with a lot of you. It has been great, and I just can't thank you enough for being here. We are excited to talk with you this morning about the end of an era, if you will, for Achieve Hartford and the launch of what we hope will be a new and exciting era as we look to even more strongly and more strategically support education and school improvement in our city. Before we jump into the program, I just want to recognize an institution that has been with us since the beginning, literally one of our founding partners. The Hartford Financial Services Group was there at the very beginning with us. They're here with us now. They're here with so many of us, right? It's in their name. But I want to just point out one thing that made the Hartford special for us, and that was about 3 years ago. The Hartford came to us and said, we really like what you're doing, but we want to see more partnership. And I thought, more partnership? We're Achieve Hartford. That's what we do. They said, not enough. I want you to think about how you can partner more strategically with the Hartford Consortium for Higher Education. Martin Esty happens to be here today. He said, here's an additional small grant for you to try and make that happen. And I thought, well, thank you, this is fantastic. Then I thought, how strategic of them, right, to identify 2 organizations that were already kind of working together, but really needed to be working much more closely. That was 3 years ago. Today, the Hartford Consortium for Higher Education and Achieve Hartford are hand in hand, pushing forward the work in our All-In Coalition. If you're on the steering committee for the All-In Coalition, you see how close Martin and I have become. It's a relationship that I think has guided a lot of the work, a lot of the focus on college enrollment and college retention. And I don't think that would have happened without the Hartford. So I just wanted to take a moment to thank the Hartford publicly and also present Sarah Morin, who's here from the Hartford, with a small award that just says, thank you for being an education reform champion in the city of Hartford. So Sarah, if you can come up, that'd be great. With that, I'm going to ask the maestro to cue up a video for your viewing pleasure. Thank you so much. I'll be with you soon.
"10 years ago, Adamowski and Perez rallied the city around a bold plan and promise to see Hartford children achieving to their full academic potential. Dissatisfied with Hartford being the lowest performing district in the state, there began an effort to aggressively overhaul this system. It started with bold leadership, a bold goal, a moral imperative, and political alignment. A voter-approved charter change in 2003 transferred executive power into the office of the mayor. This change gave then-Mayor Eddie Perez the authority to appoint 5 of the 9-member Board of Education beginning in 2005. Perez, also appointing himself to the board, set the conditions for full political alignment. The arrival of Dr. Adamowski in 2006 ushered in a new chapter of reform at Hartford Public Schools. Across the next 5 years, Dr. Adamowski would work hand in hand with Eddie Perez as mayor and board chair to sustain and spread reform. This district-led reform effort served as a successful first step to ensure more students attained higher educational outcomes. Achieve Hartford was launched with a mandate to sustain this district-led reform. Our top-line goal had been to help the system succeed. We served in our role as independent evaluator. This role was short-lived as conditions soon began to change. Perez's resignation and the end of Adamowski's tenure created a power vacuum, causing conflicts to arise right away. Dr. Christina Kishimoto was selected as successor at the end of Dr. Adamowski's tenure. She continued some of the reforms begun under Dr. Adamowski, but the political alignment began to unravel. Achieve Hartford's role with the district shifts as we respond to the changing conditions. Competing ideologies on how to move the district forward are made manifest when Dr. Beth Narvaez is hired in 2014, marking the third superintendent since the reform began. A new set of ideas and ideals are embraced at her hiring. Before meaningful change could even happen, Dr. Narvaez abruptly resigns just 2 years into her tenure. The city of Hartford faces a historic fiscal crisis, which has consumed the focus of Mayor Bronin. Dr. Leslie Torres Rodriguez faces a challenge her past two predecessors have been unable to resolve, which she has pledged to do with a focus on organizational excellence.
10 years ago, Hartford had a moment. We are now at a different moment. Each day we wait for the perfect conditions is a day lost. Achieve Hartford was founded on a belief that we could work together to make sure more students are reaching their full potential. But that work does not rest with the superintendent, mayor, and Board of Education alone. We must be prepared to embark upon a bold new way of meeting our movement's goals, and this requires you. We must work together differently. We must go from demanding change to creating change, because despite the setbacks and challenges, Hartford is still poised to win. This is Hartford's moment. Will it be yours?
I'm Naisha McCauley, and as the slide says in very big font, storyteller and communications lead. Looking at that video, we are saying really we've arrived at an inflection point, a moment of choice. And so we're asking ourselves, do we want to continue to do what we've been doing, or do we want to chart a new course together? In examining the history of Hartford, we reveal that ed reform strategies have been unable to resolve the opportunity gap and between Hartford and the surrounding suburban districts. Examining this history of Achieve Hartford reveals that despite regularly adapting our approach to changing conditions and public sector leadership, we have not succeeded in adding a level of value that would have our desired impact on student outcomes. As such, we have arrived at another moment for Hartford, where we realize that the public sector cannot do it alone. Not about blame here, but pointing out the problem is not enough. We must more rigorously activate leaders throughout the private sector to plug in and take more ownership for resolving systemic problems. We must shift from demanding change to creating change, with a focus on structural change, how we work together, and behavioral change, how we step up to own pieces of this work. To do this, we need you. But before we go any further and talk about this new way, this different way, this new approach, we have a special guest here, all the way from Buffalo, New York, to really drive home the importance of individual leadership. I welcome to the stage Sam Radford. Sam and I are going to engage in a bit of a dialogue here.
diving into this conversation about individual leadership.
All right.
But before we do that, Sam, welcome to Hartford.
First of all, thank you so much. Appreciate the invitation.
I'd like you to just tell our wonderful guests here just a little bit more about yourself.
Okay, so good morning again, everybody. My name is Sam Radford. I'm from Buffalo, New York. And just, I've been involved at every level of parent leadership that you can be involved in. I was really fortunate as a young person, just got out of the Marine Corps. A lady named Geraldine Artis grabbed me as a young parent and said that we need to have more men involved in their children's lives as a Head Start parent. And so she got me and she organized, helped me to become a parent council president, then ultimately a overall policy council president, and then from there, I went on later to become a PTA president, and ultimately I was appointed to a governance task force, and at the highest levels I was able to work with the Obama administration as a education leadership on the Education Leadership Council. So every level of parent leadership that you can imagine I've been doing since 1990. So that's almost 27 years now. So.
Well, thank you for that. We are going to dive right in.
Okay.
We have some ground to cover here.
Okay.
So I'm just going to go for it. So why did you feel called to do education organizing in Buffalo?
Okay. Do y'all mind if I just stand up? I know we sitting here. Oh, thank you. Okay, good. I appreciate that. Let me say why in this way. If you can visualize what a community would look like if you had the last 50 years, you had 25% graduation rates. So that's the community I was living in. We had, for black males in particular, we had 50 years of 25% graduation rate, and the community was just decimated. There was no hope, 55% unemployment rate, and it was just, I had the fortune of having left Buffalo and came back, so I could see how bad it was. People who had lived there their whole life just didn't know how bad it was. It was just the norm. So essentially, after, and give me 2 minutes on this, right? Because I want to just make this point, right? Because after Mrs. Artis, brought me into Head Start and showed me how to parent organize and how to be a partner, with my children to make sure they got the education they were supposed to get. I was brought into my children went to the public school system, and day one, we get into the door, and the principal at the door stops and say, "Hold on, all that stuff you can't do that here. What parents do here is banquet sales, essentially. You could not do this thing where parents are partners, we are part of the decision making. So all these things we learned in Head Start was just thrown out the window." And so that became frustrating. I was young, I didn't know how to deal with it at the time. That became frustrating. Ultimately, what we did, me and my wife, we took our children out of public school, put them in private school. Wasn't fully satisfied with that even. And we ultimately took them out and homeschooled them for 4 years until we found out what I believe to be the secret. You know what I'm saying? And I'll say what that is a little bit later. But once we got that revelation, we put our children back into public school, and we realized at that moment, that it was going to take a lot to turn around public schools. Ultimately, I became a teacher. I was a 7th, 8th grade math teacher. My wife became a teacher. She's now a principal. And so we decided that we were going to be active in not just fighting for our children, but fighting for our children.
So how were you able to bring people together to work towards the same goal?
So let me just kind of add a little bit more to that. This idea that we're going to be active, it just wasn't that simple. I'll give you an example. At that time, when we got really active around 2005 to 2006, Dr. James Williams was the superintendent in Buffalo Public Schools. And we went to Dr. Williams working with a guy named Lloyd Hargrave, who was the Title I guy. He's the Title I expert for our area. And he really had an intergenerational conversation going on with us and helped us understand how to use policy and how to use the law as leverage to be able to get things done. So we went to the superintendent. We said the policy in the school district said that there's supposed to be school-based plan and shared decision making. Section 1118 of the No Child Left Behind, ESEA, that's what it says. That's what you're supposed to be doing. Superintendent's like, okay, I hear you, but he wouldn't comply. He wouldn't follow the policy. We went further, we studied it, and found out that section Commissioner's Regulation 100.11, which was the way you implemented Section 1118, said that you were supposed to have school-based planning and decision making. Found out that the local board policy 3170 said you're supposed to be doing school-based planning and shared decision making. Finally, the superintendent was honest with us. We spent 18 months going back and forth with him, trying to get him to understand he should be sharing power with parents and we should be making these decisions together. Finally, he said, I'm gonna just be honest with you, Sam. He said, that's not gonna happen. This whole idea of school-based planning, shared decision making, that's something out of the 90s. They tried it, it didn't work. He said, here's the reason why it don't work. You bring parents, teachers, administrators to the table to talk about how we are going to share decision making. And then when we come up with a plan and we implement it and it don't work, who's the only person that gets fired? That's what he said, me. He said, so if I'm gonna get fired, we going with my plan. We ain't going with your plan. so he said, I'm not doing school-based planning and shared decision making. So, and nobody in the country does it anyway. And so he essentially told us he wasn't gonna follow the law. We were very fortunate in that we got in contact with a lady at the U.S. Department of Education who really, helped us understand the superintendent did not have that right. I'm now making a real long story real short. So over the next year or so, she worked with us and she made the superintendent really clear that she finally said to him, if you don't implement school-based planning and shared decision making, we are going to freeze the $18 million of Title I funds. And so when she ultimately said that, we got the superintendent's attention. The superintendent said, hey, what do y'all want? And so we ultimately went on and we were able to get parent facilitators in every school, school-based management teams in every school, a parent room in every school. We knew what we wanted once that conversation happened. But to kind of talk about what we did to get to that point, to answer your question, was what we realized is that people in the community just did not know what was going on in Buffalo Public Schools. Buffalo Public Schools was really the domain of the administration, the union, and all the stakeholders that worked in the building. That's who drove the conversation about what was going on. People outside of that didn't understand the details. For example, people did not believe us when we told them the Buffalo Public School District's budget was $1 billion every year. And so we had $1 billion that we were spending to educate 32,000 children. And people were like, no, that can't be true. We can't be spending upwards of $25,000 per student. But that was the truth. People did not believe that the graduation rate was that low. People did not believe all the things that we were saying was going on. And so once we start simply getting the information out, I had the fortune of, prior to 2005, I worked really closely with the union. I was a regional director for Citizen Action, so I worked closely with the union. I understood how the union got information out and how they made sure everybody understood what their position was. So what I did is use those same skills to make sure that everybody knew the other side of the information, what was going on in the community. So we worked with the churches. That was a really big partner. The church community, once they understood that, essentially, our community was being decimated by our children not being able to read, write, and do math. Right. And essentially nothing was going on and changing. So getting that information out was the critical part of how we were able to get other people involved.
So just reflecting on that statement about no one getting fired, right?
Right.
When you talk about people's livelihood, now you're talking about risk-taking. Mm-hmm. So sounds like you had to grapple with some of that yourself.
Yeah, so let me talk about two kinds of risk-taking, right? This is how real, when we got to organize, and I had some experience, and I understood that anytime you challenge the status quo, people who benefit from the way things are, they want to keep it the way things are. Yes. And so people start putting your job at risk, to kind of stop what you're doing, and they start doing a lot of things. But that really, honestly, wasn't my biggest challenge. It was an important challenge. But really what the biggest challenge was at home. Being really honest with you, it got to a point where me and my wife, now imagine this, I'm the PTA president, we go to the school, we walk into the classroom, and my son is at 6th grade at the time, and we just did that regularly. We go to see what was going on, and we walk into the classroom and it is off the hook. I mean, it is really not what's going on in the classroom, should not be going on in the classroom. So my wife says, oh no, we gotta move him out of this classroom, this is just not gonna work. And I'm like, okay, just calm down, let me get involved, see if we can get a better result. As a result of that experience, I started volunteering in that classroom for 3 days a week to change what was going on in that particular classroom. But that really wasn't enough for my wife. She was concerned that being in that environment was causing my son to stop liking to learn. And it was too critical of an age to put that at risk. So she wanted to pull him out. And I said, no, we can't do that. I'm the PTA president. If we take our kids out and save our kids, we leaving everybody else's kids. She says, I hear you, right? Just to make this real long story short, at the end of the school year, the teacher says the same thing. The third quarter, actually, the teacher says, y'all got to get your son out of here. The teacher tells that to my son. The end of the school year, the principal says the same thing. You know what I'm saying? So now the two people, the biggest stakeholders in that environment, saying this is not the best environment for your son to achieve, academically in. So, long story short, I lost the battle. You know what I'm saying? And it hurt to lose that battle because we took our children out, and put them into, the top city honors and all. And they were smart enough they was able to get in that, but it really helped me understand that the need to have a committed group of parents to maintain, to go fight and organize to change that school system. And so that personal, battle is really what had to be overcome because what I learned is that we both were right. We had a responsibility for our children. That's our primary responsibility. But we also have a responsibility for all children. We had to figure out a way to make that work. And so jobs being at risk, tension in the home, those were things that just came with the process of organizing to make an opportunity for all children.
And so bringing it to where we are here today, Hartford, with our group of stakeholders that we have here in the audience, you worked with a similar set of private sector leaders in Buffalo. Tell us about, how the impact of risk-taking for the private sector and how they came in to fix the conditions in Buffalo.
Of all the stuff I'm going to say today, everybody, this is, as far as I'm concerned, the most critical information I'm going to share. Hands down, the most important relationship that made the difference from where Buffalo was at in 2005 to where Buffalo is at today is this partnership with the private sector. I mean, when it's all said and done, the union's control over what was going on in those buildings, the Board of Education, the politics, everybody working in silos, it was just the way it was, and nobody was willing to take that on. We were really fortunate because we were able to mobilize the community. We did a one-day boycott. We got over 63% of the parents to not send their children to school as a way to to bring attention to the fact that what was going on was just out of control and it was terrible and we need to do something about it. And so what happened was the private sector got involved. Initially, a guy named Bob Wilmers, the president of M&T Bank, brought in Dr. Noel Tishy. I don't know if you know who Dr. Noel Tishy is, but a really important person to try to work with us. Didn't work out really well, and we were really fortunate they brought in Say Yes to Education. Say Yes to Education came in, and all of a sudden, two critical things happened. The first thing that happened was we went from this hopeless environment to an environment that was full of hope, because what Say Yes Education brought to the conversation was that every child gets to go to college. Every child. And it didn't have nothing to do with your economic background. So all of a sudden we had something that brought everybody together and unified everybody. And then the next step in this process of every child gets to go to college is they created something called the operating committee. We call it collaborative governance. Some people call it collective impact. But they had a requirement that the mayor, the county executive, the superintendent, the board president, the head of the union, the philanthropic community, the not-for-profit community, higher ed, parents, everybody had to come to this operating committee every 2 weeks. And now listen to me. When I say we lived in a hostile environment, it was hostile. The only time I talked to the union president is on the front page of the Buffalo News. It said, them were the only conversations we had. I mean, and it was just a hostile environment. Everybody just going after everybody. Is just, trying to power switching hands. The reform group come in, they win an election, they take over the board, they put their superintendent in, then the union fight back, they win an election, they put their superintendent in, and all we do is oscillating, going back and forth, making no progress. all of a sudden this operating committee table comes into play. And as a parent leader, I'm gonna tell you how powerful it was to be at that table with the business community, because as parents, we were just reactive. We constantly reacting to what was going on, but we always reacting after the fact. Somebody make a policy, they make a change, and then we react. When we sat at the table with the business community kept asking questions about, what's your 5-year plan? What's your 10-year plan? You know what I'm saying? Give me your trends. I mean, all of a sudden there was a whole different set of questions that we didn't really know to ask the way they was asking. And so in Buffalo, now I have to really make the long story short, but in Buffalo, we had went through 7 superintendents and interim superintendents in 5 years. That's how volatile it was. But because we had this operating committee table where everybody was at, we had the higher ed asking the right questions, we had the business community asking the right questions. So normally what we would see is that power would just switch and we go doing it to the union way to going to the reformers way. But because the business community was back there behind there asking questions, we came up with a stable plan where we put summer school in every school, and there's a whole story behind that. I can't tell it, I don't have enough time. But we got summer school in every school, we got after school in every school. We went and we put mental health clinics in after school, we put mobile health in. All the things we needed to do to stabilize our community. Really, what drove that was the business community being there with the philanthropic community, driving the conversation, whereas before that, that conversation was always driven by the superintendent. And if the superintendent changed, we had a new plan. A whole new strategic plan, we got to start all over again. All of a sudden, that didn't go on anymore. And the people that were talking had power. It wasn't just anybody. You know what I'm saying? When you had the head of the largest foundation, you had, Alphonse O'Neill, who was head of, Alphonse O'Neill White, head of Blue Cross Blue Shield. And we had the scholarship committee, you know what I'm saying, that was controlling this scholarship for all students. So things begin to change because we learned from the business community. We learned how to be proactive instead of reactive. We learned how to plan for the long term. And, the one thing that we had already knew, but the business community helped us really, understand how to implement it better, was the role that policy, we had to understand policy. Right. We had to understand how the system was supposed to work. Because as parents, we just reacted to our specific circumstances. We didn't study how the system was supposed to work. The business community challenged us to make sure we understood what was supposed to be happening, who was supposed to be doing what, and we had the ability to hold people accountable, and it just really turned around for us at that operating committee table. So instead of talking to the union president through the front page of the Buffalo News, I'm sitting at the table, and you know what, being honest with you, I didn't like the guy at all, right? But after sitting there with him week after week after week, I realized that we agreed way more than we disagreed. That really at the end of the process, we really wanted the same thing. He just had a responsibility to protect his constituency, and he wasn't going to do that. So we couldn't ask the union to be weaker. We had to be stronger. And so when we got stronger, it forced the union to respect us, and then we could have real conversations. We weren't just asking people nicely to do the right thing, but we had mobilized power to, people had to respect, and they did the right thing as a result of having to respect our mobilization of power and the fact that we could deliver too. Just like the union, we took a book out of their playbook. Just like they can shut the system down by pulling their refuse to participate. We said if we know Buffalo Public Schools got a 45% graduation rate, certain high schools, you send your kids to, got 30% graduation rate, they're not going to graduate. It's irresponsible as parents to send your child to that school and they only got a 30% chance to graduate. So we said we have to have the ability to withdraw participation too. And if we can withdraw participation and shut the system down, then they will respect us because that's the power that the teachers had. And once they seen that we were mobilizing that way and we could do it, and we partnered with the church to really demonstrate that it could happen, then all of a sudden people listen to each other out of more respectful, a more respectful context, and so we was able to make significant progress.
So final thought here as we close out our interview. Just tell us now where we are and touch on just like the graduation rate. Where is Buffalo at now as a result of this work?
And I can touch on the graduation rate, but it's not just the graduation rate, right? See, Buffalo now is in a place where we have hope. I'm talking about hope to where you go into the barbershop and everybody's talking about, where kids are going to college at. They talk about kids going to college like they used to talk about kids going to high school. When you go into churches, they competing on who getting the most kids into college and to what colleges. We went from a graduation rate that was at 48% in 2011 to today, with this past year, 64%. And trending on 70% according to the superintendent. And what I say to you, it's the culture that has changed. It's the environment that has changed, and it was really hard. And being real honest with you, it is really hard. Because now we, for example, one of the issues that we're confronting in our success is that, to some degree we can close the achievement gap, but at the top schools, Buffalo is 20% white. But at the top schools, the 3 top schools, they got like between 40 and 60% white students. So we have all of our white students concentrated at the top schools, and they try to convince us that it was a fair process that was in place that was causing that to happen. But we brought in the Office of Civil Rights. They did, a study, the Fisher Exact test. They used to say statistically that was impossible. So we're in a place now we confront these issues around race that makes it a little bit, more challenging. But because we've got the success, we got the momentum going, and we trust each other. People say all the time, you move at the speed of trust. Trust is really what has allowed us to do this really hard work. And so that's where we're moving out of Buffalo. So Buffalo is a place now where people are investing, people are bringing their kids, and it couldn't be better.
Awesome.
Thank you
so much, Sam, for sharing your story of leadership. Thank you. All right. So thank you, Sam, for that. I'd like to welcome Paul Holzer back to the stage to continue this conversation about risk-taking and leadership as we get to where Achieve Hartford is going. Paul Holzer.
Sam touched on some themes that I want to touch on as well, but I'm going to do it in a different way. I'm going to paint a picture for you all. I thought about this for a while, and we're in education, so I'm going to bring it back to school. So I'm 15 years old, and I'm a sophomore. I had just moved to a new town the year before. But other than that, I also just took on a cousin from Ecuador who moved to the US to live with us and my family to do her senior year. And she's there to learn and master English. I'm there to just figure out how to fit in, really. And there's this one time where, early in the sophomore year, I invited some friends over to my house. And, we're goofing around, we're doing whatever. My cousin, Allison Ordonez, is with us. And somehow or another, she makes a joke about how she's tutoring me in chemistry. Ha ha, very funny. It's one thing to say this to my face, it's another thing to say this in front of my new friends. Transgression, big time. And so I had to make a choice. Do I really focus on including my cousin, socially, or do I point out that she's a senior, okay? She shouldn't even be taking a sophomore level chem class, and that they only placed her in my chem class because of her English. I took the low road and felt somewhat vindicated, but not really, and she stormed off. Later that evening, I apologized, and that led to the most unexpected reaction. So Allison's 4'11", and she just gets right up into my face. And she says, for you, this is just one class in one grade. For me, it means that when I say I speak English, I can prove it. And that's all that matters. And in that moment, I realized something incredible, right? When she says matters, she's talking about when she goes home to Ecuador. And when she says matters, she means her entire life trajectory. And what happened after that was I woke up. I realized how I never even asked my mom why she took the risk to come to the US. Alone, first legally, then staying illegally. I had had 2 previous cousins already come and join us in our house for their senior years in high school, Maria Soledad and Alexita. I had never asked them why they had risked their home life, their friendships to come to learn English. I had never really asked these questions, and I had also never really focused on the answers that were all around me. When I look back now, or even right around then, there was only one sister out of my mom's 4 sisters. She had 4 brothers who had made it. It was my mom. The other 3 were divorced with children living in the same apartment that they grew up in, that I got to see and hang out with and sleep in the same bed as all my cousins. I just thought it was really cool. Of my entire group of cousins, of which there are many, given that my mom had 8 brothers and sisters, only 3 of them made it to a real career. Alexita, Maria Soledad, and later on, Allison. I started a friendship with Allison that turned more like into siblings. She became a sister. And even more than that, she became a great friend to my friends. And she became one of my best friends, albeit from afar. And what she taught me in those moments and what I learned afterwards was that there are some people who are just very comfortable taking risks. Or if they're not comfortable, they find comfort in it. And Allison was that person. And so were her cousins before her, and so was my mom. You know, Sam, talked a lot about personal risk in what he shared. And when I think about taking risks, I think, we're in Hartford. We're the insurance capital of the world. This is not necessarily the place where you're going to find a lot of risk takers. Risk managers, yes, right? Risk takers, another story. And when I think about the problem that we gather together to try and solve, we have to be honest and think of it as having a high probability of failure. Right? The challenges are that great. When the students arrive at school, it's obvious to them, their family, to the teachers, all of the resources that are missing, all of the needs that go unaddressed. If you are a teacher in Hartford, I have never had the honor. I can only imagine what it's like every day to notice what's missing, what you don't have, what goes unaddressed. And I look at the situation and I say, we have a choice, right? There's a lot of new things happening right now in Hartford. The superintendent's relatively new. The mayor's only been here a year and a half. It would make a lot of sense to wait, right, to see how things go with the state budget. Maybe there'll be more resources next year. Maybe they'll fix the ECS formula. Maybe we'll find out more about how the school district will look once schools are consolidated. We all know that that's coming. Maybe there are other initiatives that the mayor can roll out. There is a lot of great things happening, and there's a lot of great reasons to wait. Another thing we could do is just say, let's continue to support the work, but let's just support it a little harder, right? Let's just go a little deeper into our pockets, or with a little more intensity. That's an option. But I think there's another option, and dare I use this word, co-leadership. I think the option here is that we look at these issues and we figure out, how do we co-lead around them? How do we find even better ways to leverage the assets that we know we have? And when I look around the room, I'm filled with a lot of hope, because the incredible amount of resources in our city are represented here and elsewhere, whether it's from a perspective of philanthropy, corporate investment, higher education investment, the nonprofit community. This is a very unique place, very unique. And what we're going to be asking you to do in joining this work, we don't take lightly. Right? I'll be honest, last fall when Superintendent Narvaez resigned, it was dark times for me personally. There was this kind of dark feeling of failure that washed over me and our staff. Right? Who was it that was charged to sustain the reform, as Naisha had mentioned in the video? And here we were facing what would be our 4th superintendent in a 6-year period. But there's another story I want to tell. So picture this. I'm in college, Dartmouth. For anyone who understands the immigrant experience, it's filled with nuance. So as I proclaimed to my parents that I want to become a teacher, it was a real problem. Like a real problem. Like I didn't come all the way to this country so that you could become a teacher kind of problem. My dad, he was footing the bill, and his problem was not quite as intense, but it was still like, I didn't send you to Dartmouth College so you could become a teacher. But it was my mom's reaction that really stung, right? And I spent a year barely talking to my parents. And I struggled. I mean, it was a real struggle, knowing that if we did talk, it was a never-ending argument. And I didn't even get a chance to go home because I was doing a volunteer trip over Christmas, Hanukkah. Yes, there are Ecuadorian Jews out there, just in case you didn't know. And so it was a really rough time emotionally. But I had learned something, right? Something that had sunk in around the importance of following what it is we say are our dreams, the importance of taking risks for things that are worth it. And I stuck it out. Right? And I graduated with a bachelor's degree and a teacher's certificate to teach high school English. And I went on down to Washington, D.C. and became a teacher. And I mean, I thought I learned about risk then. I mean, the risk that my kids took every day just coming to school was a whole nother bag of lessons for me. And that job was everything I thought it would be. The teaching profession was a dream come true. The highs, the lows, everything. And I'll never forget when the school that I was working at, we always had a keynote speaker for graduation, when the students asked me to be their keynote speaker. And they asked me to deliver the speech in English and to all of their parents in Spanish. And it was just one of the highlights and just really stuck out to me as why it had all been worth it. And as it turns out, my mom didn't mind so much coming down to Washington, D.C. and visiting my class. In fact, she loved hanging out with the Ecuadorian students. But that was another real big moment for me in thinking about why it is that we do this. And there is a why for each of us in here that trumps all of the economic reasons for why we need to solve education in Hartford. And what I want to ask of you all today, I want you to make a choice. And I want you to think about the choices that Achieve Hartford is making today too. We're saying no more to the role that we played in the past, which for those of us who've been around long enough, you're a window into education reform, you're a critical friend, the watchdog, the independent evaluator, the neutral convener on any topic related to education, mayor's forum, candidate forum, all of those roles that we've played in the past. we're putting those aside and saying they have served their purpose for the time being. What led me to this point, to get personal again, is that when Dr. Narvaez resigned and we had to look at what had been accomplished or not accomplished in sustaining the reform, I guess we felt like, I imagine many district folks do, where you say, am I really tying my career to the success or failure of urban education reform? Is that really what we are continually willing to do? And when we looked at that, we thought, no, I don't really want to do that anymore. But we thought there had to be a different way. And the board, our esteemed board of directors, was involved in this process. And when we thought about embracing the challenges that we've had, we had to say, is there another way? Or is it just pack it up, pack it in, right? It's been a great 9 years. We've had fantastic impact in a lot of ways, not necessarily all the way on student outcomes, but undoubtedly added value. And we decided that we weren't quite ready for that. There's kind of a no give up attitude amongst our board, which I am sure is shared by everyone in this room. But the stakes, honestly, couldn't be higher. I mean, if we don't get this right, that means that every kid, let's say that graduates high school, is going to show up at college and have that same feeling that Justine Dixon, that some folks know, was at UConn, felt when she got there. This feeling of like, I am so out of my league. That is the feeling that every kid who actually makes it is going to have. That there's this feeling of every parent, like a parent we worked with for a while, named Petra Mulero. The urgency in her face to win the lottery, to avoid sending her children to schools, was palpable. It was kind of scary, the look in her face when it came to the choice application process. There's more of that in store if we don't solve this. And when I think about what things would look like if we do, right? This is about every kid in Hartford showing up to school feeling like their education is tailored to fit them. This is like teachers showing up feeling like the entire city has their back. This is like kids graduating feeling like they're going to a next step that is not only a good fit for them, but that they feel totally prepared for, and that they are totally prepared for. It looks like a lot more than 1 in 4 kids finishing a post-secondary degree and coming right into the diverse industries that we have here and filling the pipeline, not only for Hartford, but for the region and for the state. And it also looks like adults coming together on teams, on the ground, side by side with the public sector, figuring it out. That's what I see. But as we said before, the school district can't do it alone. No more demanding change. We have to help create it. And we need your help to lead it. So we are choosing, as a staff and a board, to take a risk and change fundamentally what we do. And we'll get into the details of this shortly. But my hope for you all this morning is that you're willing to take some risks as well. Thank you. Thank you. So I'm going to move quickly and just talk about our new approach. We're calling it Grass Tops Organizing. We're taking the tenets of grassroots organizing, and hopefully there are some of you who know that work, and if you don't, you heard Sam talk about it. And we're pulling them into the grass tops. We were founded predominantly by the private sector and in partnership with community leaders. And we're going back to our roots. And when I say our approach, I'm talking about the same goal of still closing the opportunity and achievement gap. I'm talking about as a different route to get there. Grasstops organizing looks a bit like this. It looks a bit like engagement work, organizing, and then figuring out how to sustain the work that has been created. When I look at who we have to engage and organize, higher education plays a big role. It's going to be a lot bigger. Corporations, big and small. Philanthropy, big and small. And also the nonprofit sector. There's no doubt that we already come together. There's so many different coalitions. There's so much different work out there. But we're talking about it on a whole new level. And the focus on the private sector is matched by a focus on 2 or 3 issues alone. There's going to be a lot of things happening that relate to education in the city. You're going to have to get your news about it somewhere else. There's going to be a lot of reasons to convene. Luckily, there's a lot of you who can do the convening. So what does education, organizing, and sustaining look like? Let's look at the All-In Coalition. If you look up behind me, you see a lot of things that have to do with bringing people together around one agenda. You see a lot of things up there that relate to backbone organization, coordination. There are so many private sector leaders that have yet to be tapped. I'm going to say that again. There are so many private sector leaders that have yet to be tapped. We're saying it's our job to find them. Another issue that we've chosen is the design of Weaver High School. For those who know, Weaver High School is set to reopen in 2019. This school has the opportunity to become the best high school in the city and eventually in the state, if we make it so. There's engagement work there that has to happen, but it's about the organization of time, money, and resources to get it there in a way that will ensure outcomes. You see, we're much more focused on student outcomes now than we ever have been, because that's what's needed. And I'm going to ask our board chair to come up in just a minute, but I want to just paint this picture for you guys very clearly. Whatever it is that we need to accomplish, we know we've got to do it together. But the question that we have to start asking each other is how. We can't leave the how to someone else. We have to figure out the how and then bring the how to meet the public sector's how. Action teams and work groups are what it's all about for us. Today you're going to be asked to join action teams and work groups. There should be a little slip. Tell us what you want to join. But also, feel free to put down, you heard me say 2 or 3 initiatives. What do you think the third one should be? And with that, I would like to call Phil Waldeck, who's chair of our board and president of Potential Retirement, to come give some brief remarks. Thank you so much, Phil.
Well, thanks, Paul, and thanks to everyone. As Paul mentioned, I'm the chair of Achieve Hartford's board and the president of Prudential Retirement. Prue engaged with Achieve Hartford at its founding, working with the Metro Hartford Alliance when Achieve Hartford was started 9 years ago. And the reason behind that is sustaining change is really hard and takes a community to make it happen, something Prudential's very focused on. It's one of our 3 critical priorities for corporate social responsibility. And what Paul's been describing is how to create more capacity and more impact by engaging more broadly, despite a really, really challenging environment. And I think this is about how do we stay the course and make more of an impact. And the board and I have been very involved with this direction that Paul has just described. And I recognize that it's ambiguous at this stage. We'll need more concrete examples, and Paul and Achieve Hartford are just getting started. But I think let's embrace that ambiguity. Let's identify the problem. We're in an environment now that has many headwinds, but how does this community acknowledge that uncertainty and then pivot to a new approach, and an approach where we can make changes to create the impacts that we want to make. And ultimately, Achieve Hartford seeks to activate more leaders in the private sector, from nonprofits, from academia, to be focused on the same outcomes that we share, but we haven't had that combined energy put into the places that can make an impact. And Paul only very quickly gave the examples of Weaver High School and All In. We need to find opportunities like that, really focus, engage, and then have successes that then will start a flywheel. They'll get more energy and more people involved. So consider this the power of an invitation. This is an opportunity to help these initiatives like the All In Coalition and Weaver High School have more impact, to support our superintendent in the schools, and most importantly, the children that are currently vulnerable, that need more from us. So I really want to thank Paul and the Achieve Hartford staff for their commitment and for their courage to define the problem and challenge us to engage further. And I'd like to thank all of you for your commitment to education, for voting with your feet to be here today. And there's an expression that individual commitment to a group effort is what makes a team work. Individual commitment is what makes a company or an organization work, and ultimately, individual commitment is what makes a society work.
And so this morning, I leave you with this. We have 3 work groups or action teams that have been launched with the All In Coalition. There are 3 work groups: student learning experience, climate and culture, family and community engagement, and soon to be a new one focused on health, I believe, that are focused at the design level for Weaver High School. There is also a lot more to be done. But if we're going to do it, we're going to do it by bringing everything we have to the problem and not waiting for someone to tell us exactly what we're supposed to do. So my invitation to you is to join us. No more demanding change. Let's create it. Find one of my staff people on your way out. Talk to us about how you can plug in. Fill out the submission form so that we can follow up with you. And also let us know whether or not we can include you in a private meeting 3 weeks from now, where we'll talk exactly about all of those work groups, all of those action teams, how exactly we're going to work together, what the expectation is of you in our new work, and also if there is any input as to a third area of work. So with that, I just say thank you all for being here. Please hold on to hope for Hartford. And please, on your way out, just look around. Look people in the face. Look people in the eyes. See the commitment that we have, and then commit to acting on it. Thank you all so much for being here. Appreciate it.